Good evening, everybody. Tonight we got Mark with us. He's going to show us how to set up moving heads and make them work great. Take it away, Mark.
All right. Well, thanks, John. And yeah, we're gonna talk about the moving heads, but we're gonna talk more importantly about. I think we're gonna concentrate on the moving head advance effect. And let me get my slideshow out of the way and start my screen share. All right. So this is a little test layout that I use for when I was first started playing around with the moving head advance effect back when Gil had it in a different branch and just testing it out. So and I've stuck with it because I think it shows some of the power of the new effect. I wouldn't recommend setting up your moving heads this way. You can see everyone's facing a different direction. Heads 1, 2, 3, and 5 rotate in the counterclockwise direction. Heads 4 and 6 rotate in the clockwise direction, and you can even see head 6 here has got a different tilt angle than all the others. But even if you did set up your moving heads like this with the new moving head effect, it would make them all work and play nicely together. Let's hop in here. And all right, I'm just going to drop the moving head effect on here because I just want to get so we can see this dialog box. So this is the new moving head advance effect. It's right there. Looks like a little moving head. Pulls up this dialog box. And the main two ones that I tend to use in here is position, the position tab, and a little bit on the control pad, or I'm sorry, the pathing tab. We'll talk about some of these other ones, but we're going to spend most of our time in the position tab. But what this grid represents is your moving head range. With when the crosshairs are in the center here, your moving head would be pointed straight up to the sky. And as you come down, and actually let me see if we'll do that so you guys can see. I see you got a shutter. And get me some dimmer on here. Get the dock back where I need it to. That's good. All right, it doesn't want to behave. All right. We'll restart. And I just got to get the master view set, which we should talk about as well, but let's apologize for that. All right, we're back. Oh, the menu got screwed up there for a second, but like I was saying, if you click straight up, all your moving heads are pointed straight up in the air, and then as you work this forward down, they point towards the audience. This way they go away, and then they point to the. If you go to the left, it points to the the left as you're viewing, and back to the right. So there is some important things in the layout that comes with setting up, and that's I've got a little slideshow that I wanted to share here. Let's get So the couple things we need to know when you're setting up your moving heads, and this applies to these are some additional settings that the new effect requires. If you need to know what your orient to zero is, and that's your home or rest position. So when you power on the heads and they go through a little startup and then they come to wherever they end up, that's their rest position. So you could have them mounted on your house in pretty much one of four ways, either pointing right, forward, to the back, or to the left. And that's your zero. In the effect, it's orient to zero, but it's your home or rest position. Then we also need to tell xLights where to orient to front is, and that's how to get to the front of your display. So let's start with, we'll start with this head here. And this example assumes that your heads rotate counterclockwise as your DMX channels go up in value. So in order to orient to the front for this one, it's rotating counterclockwise, we'd have to do 270 degrees of rotation, which then leaves us, right, we still got enough room to keep rotating this way 180 degrees, which we have in that effect that we're just looking at. And obviously we can go back this way 180 degrees. So if you have your heads pointed towards the front, you're actually going to want to, your orient to zero is actually going to need to be 360 degrees. We sort of have to preload some motion into it because we still have enough room to rotate 180 degrees counterclockwise. But because we preloaded, we can go clockwise. If you didn't preload it, you could never go this direction. If it points to the back, right, we're going to start it. It's going to take 180 degrees to get to the front. We still have 180 degrees. We can go this direction, and we can still go back this way and meet it. And if you have your heads pointed to the left and it rotates counterclockwise, it's going to take 90 degrees to get to the front. And we still got enough room to go this way. But there's a problem with this one, right? If we only have now 90 degrees of rotation to go back this direction. So my recommendation is if you're going to want to use the moving head advance effect and your heads rotate counterclockwise, set it up in one of these first three areas. Now if your heads rotate clockwise, you'd want to avoid this one. You'd want not have it point to the right. You'd want to use one of these three. So that's one limitation of the moving head advance effect. Depending on which way your heads rotate, you're going to want to make sure you're not set up in a position where you can't get this full 180 degrees of movement in both directions. And then the second little extra bit of information we have to tell doing our xLight setup is on the tilt. And we have to describe the orient to zero, and that's the same thing. That's where the head comes to rest. And that's basically this angle here below the horizontal, right? And orient up, which is how to point straight up into the air. And we can do that with a little bit of math. So first thing we have to know is our moving head tilt range, and that's the amount of, it's the angle capacity it has to rotate from down in one position all the way through, pointing up to the back down again. And it ranges from most heads somewhere between like 210 and 270 degrees, and you'll find it in your manual. So first example, we're just going to use 220 degrees. So in order for our head to get from here to here, it's got 220 degrees of capable rotation. So to figure out our orient to zero, we're going to take our tilt range, we're going to take off 180, and we're just going to divide that number by 2. So in our case, that's going to be 20 degrees. That's really what we're doing, right? This from here to here is 220. We know our horizontal is 180, so if we subtract that, we're left with 2 of these angles. That's why we divide by 2, because we only need to get one of those. And then to get the orient up angle, we're just going to take our orient to zero and add 90 degrees, right? So we know we want to go, in this case, it's 20 degrees from here to here. We need to go another 90 degrees from here to here. So in this case, it would be 110. So those are the 2 additional setups we need to get to, information we need to And where that goes is in your layout. We'll just click on one of these heads, for example. Under your pan motor. So here's the orient to forward. Since this one rotates clockwise, it takes 270 degrees to get to the front. The orient to 0, in this case 90 by xLights definition, has it going to the right. For example, just click on this one, which is pointing towards the rear. So under the pan motor, you can see now my orient to 0 is 90 degrees, so that has it the way it's on my house, and the orient to forward is 180. And then let's come back to this one. It's easier to see from the side, I figure. So we got tilt motor. It's the same thing. Now in this case, our range of motion is 210 degrees, so that means the orient to 0 in this case is 15. So that's this angle here from horizontal down. And the orient up would be the 90 plus my 15 degrees, which gives me 105. And like this one over here, it's got 270 degrees of tilt range. So its orient to 0 is 45. That's why it's got a much steeper angle down. And the orient up is the 90 plus the 45 to 135. So these are this pan and tilt information is two different pieces of information you have to add in. Everything else, when xLights converted over, as long as you're on version 2024 dot, I believe 9 or 10 is when it started. Your moving heads got converted over to this new advanced stuff. So your channels and everything would have come over just fine. You would just need to put in these other 2 bits of information. And probably one last thing is on the tilt motor, and this should come up, on the pan motor. If your heads rotate counterclockwise, you want the reverse box checked. And if they rotate clockwise, like this one does, then you don't want that checked. On the pan motor, you don't want the reverse checked. So that covers everything on getting your head set up to use the moving head advance effect. Kyle Bostic did a whole moving heads gems about, about 6 weeks ago, I think. And he covered into a full portion of the setup. So I'm not going to go through that all again. I just really wanted to concentrate on how to get to the additional settings needed to get to start using this new effect. So with that said, we can jump into the sequencer. Let me just give myself some more sequence length to play with here. We'll go through some examples and some different ways, at least the way I sequence, and we'll save some time for some questions. Let me just dock that up there and squeeze some extra space so we can see everything. Let me add a quick timing track here. So we've got something to snap to a little bit. All right, so this I use a lot. Let me go back to the layout. So this is still set up a lot of the ways where you have these different string models that map the moving head channels. So I've got one for dimmers, I got one for shutters, I got one for pan, tilt. The only ones you really need to use, or the only ones I use with the moving head effects, is I control the dimmers, still using that, and then I turn my shutter on this way. There is a way to use the dimmer in the new effect. I think this gives a little more flexibility to do it here, and I'll try and demonstrate that a little bit. So we'll get the shutter turned on the whole way. Let's just start with something really easy. We'll drop this effect in. And let's just say we want to make an effect where these moving heads start facing the audience. And I can give us a little more real estate here. There we go. and just pan up. We'll start with that, and then we'll start building on more complicated effects. So when we click on this, we need to select our fixtures over here. So we're just going to select all of them. Now we're all checked. So now whenever I click, they're all going to move together. So let's just say we're going to start the tilt angle of 75. And now we want to pan up. So the easiest way to do that is going to be, if we click on this arrow, we can do a value curve. But let's just look here. If we move this from here up, you can see, all right, so 0 is straight up in the air. So we said we wanted to start at, we'll use a ramp. We want to start at, say, 75 and go up to 0. All right, and you see, we get a nice little fade up, and we can control that. If we want it faster, we shorten up the time. Now here's a little something we got to be careful of when we're sequencing is, if you look, here you see they all do a whole bunch of stuff, and that's because there was no effect here to tell the heads what to do. So they were all here, they're all at their rest position, and they've got to try and catch up before that. So what we really need to do is create a little bit of preload a sequence or preload some movement so they're in the right start position. An easy way to do that I like to do is I'll just come in here and I'm going to just right click and I'm just going to split my effect here. And then I drag it out in the beginning. And I want to make sure I hit all, so I'm selecting all my heads. Now I just want to get rid of this value curve. And I know we were starting our tilt at 75. So now that that matches, now what will happen is you see when it hits this effect, it's going to do all that preloading motion. So by the time it gets to our tilt up, it's in proper position. We're going to give it a little more time to get there so we can demonstrate that. All right, so the next effect we'll build, we'll drop another new moving head effect over here. I'm just going to put the dimmer on below it to turn some lights on. And you can see it's inherited whatever we did on the last one. So if you come over here and you go to status, you can hit reset to default, and that will just clear everything out. So let's go back to position. And same thing, we'll start with it pointing down, and then we're going to go over what this fan pan does. The fan pan, as you can see, creates a fan on the pan angle, and it's basically putting 17 degrees between each of these heads. Or we'll go with 15 so it'll be easier to memorize. And then we can even do the same thing. So but let's just say we want to start at that same position, right? I want to start at 75. Again, this is one where I would like, if I know where I'm starting, I'll split it ahead and then I'll just drag this over to the end of that effect. And so now I know I'm starting here, and let's have our fan pan go from a ramp, put a ramp on there. So we'll go from 15 to say 0. And nothing happened. And that is because I didn't hit all. I didn't tell the heads what we're actually doing. So there's our 15 to 0 still in there. And we'll just shorten it up so you can see it. But you can see as it finishes this other effect, now the heads are moving back into position, getting into the fan, and then they're ready for that movement. And we can combine multiple things, right? We could go from 70, on the tilt, we could go from 75 to 0 as well. Make sure I hit all before I do that. And so now it's going from that fan rising up into a vertical fade. And so now we'll add do another effect here. So I'm just going to hit all status, reset to defaults. Put a dimmer on so we can see what the lights are doing. And I'm just going to come over here. If I click right here, each one of these degrees is 45. So now I'm going to hit all. So I'm going to spin my head to 90 degrees. And then now we're going to see what this fan tilt does. If you can see the fan tilt. The same thing, it's very similar to what the fan pan does, except on the tilt. So let's say we wanted to start here, and we're going to do a little. So same thing. I know that's where I want to start this effect, so I'm going to split it. I've got my start position all set. I'll just let that drag out as my positioning effect. And we're going to have this. We'll put another ramp angle on here, and we'll go from 25 to 0. And I'll probably do that a lot. I still do it all the time. You got to remember, every time you click off, you've got to tell it what heads you're messing with. So. I'm going to make this a little longer because I actually want to I want to change it all this time. I want to change this fan tilt to, instead of a ramp, we're going to ramp up and down. So we were starting at 25, go up to 0, back down to 25. Now, so far we just had the lights on all the time, but we can, on this dimmer, we can control the brightness here. So we could have, let's say I want to start intensity of 0 and an end intensity of 0, end intensity of 100. So you can see here it's showing exactly what it's doing. And let me just stretch this out. We can make this happen a little bit slower. And so that's one way. Another option, we could actually use a color wash on here. And I want to flip it around because I want to have black in the front and white in the middle. Like you see, it's doing a color wash from black to white. So it looks very similar to what we were just doing. But if we come over here and make a circular palette, we can create ourselves an effect where now it's rising up, it gets brighter until it hits the peak and then fades back out towards the end. All right, do another quick example here. All status, let's reset so we're all back to where we started. So the next part of this that I want to show you guys, let's see, so we're going to go to a tilt angle of 75. No, not a fan tilt. Tilt angle is 75. Just look at my notes here. And then I want to show you what groupings do. So right now, if we do a fan pan, you can see they all fan out. What groupings do is it's going to treat it's going to treat the heads on a grouping of two. It's going to treat every two heads as its own little group. So now when I do this fan pan, you can see it's heads 1 and 2 are acting the same as respect to the fan as 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. So this allows us to get create some really interesting movements very easily. And if I change this groupings to 3, now it's going to treat heads 1, 2, 3 as one group and heads 4, 5, and 6 as second group. Now obviously with the fan pan, since the middle head doesn't do anything, it's not quite as interesting in this case. But if you had 4 heads, you could have your groupings, or sorry, if you had 8 heads, you could have your groupings down to 4. But we'll go back to groupings at 2. And let's start with a fan pan of, say, 25. Let's make this a little more interesting. Let's see how 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're going to go 12. We'll give ourselves 12 little timing tracks of time there. So we're going to go to the fan pan, and we're going to go and choose sawtooth. Let's go from 25 to minus 25. And we're going to bounce that over 6. So these blue lines on here are showing up are these same as these timing marks. So if we do, if we're going to bounce basically every timing mark. Of course, I have to hit all. But actually, before I do that, let me split this to get our positioning. Now we'll hit all. We'll come back in here to our fan pan. There. All right, so that's a bit fast. We'll stretch it out to make it a little slower. But you see, you could get, this is a way you could have the lights now, your head's bouncing back and forth to the beat of the music very, very easily with just something like that. And you can still combine it with other movements. And if we wanted to take it a step further, we could, same thing, we could go with a start intensity of 0, or start intensity of 100, end intensity of 0, and we'd only have 12 cycles in here. So now we can actually get the lights to pulse and blink. And this is showing us what's going on with the brightness. So like I said, it's an easy way to do create another neat effect. And let's keep moving forward. How are we doing? We're doing good on time, right? Yeah, only a half hour in. Perfect. We'll drop another moving head advance effect in. Select all. Let me reset them. All right, so I guess we'll talk a little bit about, so there is this dimmer tab in here, and you can use this with the moving head effects. So you can turn them, you can turn your dimmer on, you can turn it off, right? You can also, if you wanted to, let me start with it off. You can come in here, so you can create a lot of the same effects that you can. You know, and you could, so you have ways to ramp it in here and do all sorts of things. So this is certainly something you can use. I choose not to use this because I just feel I have more control down here using it right on the dimmer channel versus doing it in here. These do show up as the little timing tracks and timing marks in here. But I have found there isn't the ability to snap to them like there is down here. So me personally, I don't use this window, but I at least wanted to point out to you what it does. I want to talk about pathing. Pathing is a way we can draw a shape that the head is going to move in. And you can actually save them as presets. These are some that I've drawn. So we'll just draw one here for the, so I click, we'll just draw the square again because that's one's easy to see. And then to get out of it, I just hit escape. So let me turn on, let me put something on. We don't want that. We'll get our dimmer light on. Let's see. All right, so this path, or this window is just showing a shape. There's not really a relationship in degrees, or at least not that I have found. But this path is relative to your position here. So we're going to set, if I come down here, so now this is basically the center of that path. And you can see now the heads, they're drawing that whole, they're drawing that square shape that we did. I'm just going to stretch this out a little bit so it's a little bit slower. All right. So it's going over, down, this, and up. And we can load, we can load other shapes. I've got this one. We'll hit all. We'll load this one. And so now it's following that path. But another neat thing we can do is I'm going to, in this case, I'm going to click ignore the pan. So now you can see it's just moving, it's just following the up and down portion without panning the across. So let's go into the position. Let's just add a little bit of a fan pan here to spread them out a little bit. We're going to come back into pathing. So this time offset is, let's actually just do scale first. So if I take the scale and we go, all it is, it's reducing the amplitude of this effect. It's squishing it, right? So it's getting smaller and it's smaller and smaller. Same thing if you go bigger, but at some point you may end up getting out of the range of the head. So we'll just get it back to 0 is the default. We'll leave it at 0. So what time offset does is it staggers the effect of when this takes. So now we're able to create, a wave, simple one palette. And this will import, if someone does this on 8 heads and comes on 6, it's going to import with just this moving head effect, your dimmer, and your shutter if it needs it. There's no need for channel mapping. There's no need for adjusting offsets if your heads are pointing different directions. So this is some of what some of the hard work the developers put in to try to make importing moving head sequences easier. We can go back. We can change. We come back to the square, and if I do the square, we probably got to keep the pan on. But the same thing, you're going to get a movement, a staggered movement, or this this weird little spiral. We probably need to move the scale down a little bit because I probably made it too big. So we can create some very complex movements using that. So let's see what is next. We got another one. So up to this point, we've just been having all the lights on all the time. Let's talk about some ways we can manipulate these and not have everything on all the time. But let's start with so we'll just work with this. So I'm going to insert another layer below here. So I have 2 layers on my on my dimmer. So let's just say we wanted to, let's say these are our beats of our music, and we wanted to have the left half of the lights go on and then the right half swap back and forth between the beats. There's a couple different ways to do this, right? I can turn on this on effect, right? That's what we're using to control the dimmer. Actually, let's even have it go out. And that's a little, let's just, we'll do it over, we'll do it over 2 timing marks. So if we use we can use our buffer. If I right click here and I can say halves, give me the left half. So now we're only going to light up our left 3 moving heads. And this buffer is based on, in our layout here. So it's just splitting our, these are my dimmers. So it's just splitting, it's just taking the left, it's just taking these 3. So even if you're moving heads, we're not evenly spaced. If you had 2 out wide, 2 in the middle, and 2 here, if you did left and right, it's going to be based on how they're drawn down here and where they fall. And I could have done it on 1 line, but we'll put it down here just to make it a little bit easier in here. So then I'm just going to switch this buffer, the halves, to the right half. And if we copied and pasted this effect a few times, you can see we get an effect where we got the lights bouncing back and forth. And now you could still combine this with other movement. I'm just going to, we'll forego that. I wanted to talk more here about some different ways to do the lighting. So I'm just going to use this same position. We'll keep the static position. So let's imagine these timing marks now are some sort of custom beats to drum beats or something, and we want to have the lights cycle through on the drum hits. Actually, so one way to do that, we can do that with our VU meter. We're going to put the VU meter here on our dimmers. Okay, I'm going to change the type to timing event bar. Okay, and let me slide this out a little bit. So our bars is set to 6 because we have 6 heads. And we're going to change our timing track to be, we'll say this 250-second metronome. So now what's happening is every beat is a cycling across. So again, this is another way you can get a way you can sequence two specific beats, have this light up one at a time to the beat. But if someone had 8 heads, it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then repeat back around. And actually, in this case, the number of bars doesn't matter as long as it's greater than your moving heads. See if I go all the way up to 60, it doesn't matter. But if I got down to say 4, it's only going to do the first 4. So as long as it's, if someone sequenced to 8 and sent it to you with 6, this would drop in and it would cycle right through. All right, so here we're able to get them to bounce left and right. Here we can get them to go to the beats. All right. What if you want to flash odds and evens? Well, there's a way we can do that. And it's actually going to be a very similar effect, except this time we want to use, instead of timing event bar, we want to use timing event bars. Now this one does require you to have it set to the actual number of heads you have. So this is, flip this around. This will make more sense. So we're going to turn on white and black. So what it's doing The easiest way to see this is if you expand out your dimmers and expand out your strand. Now we can see exactly what's going on here, how it's bouncing back and forth. Because it's doing white. Stop it. So right now it's doing white, black, white, black, white, black, because we chose that two colors. If I was to change this other red one to white and select it, now you'll see it's going to give us a whole different effect. Now something else we can do, right? When we look at this, like, yeah, and we can do it in either one of these, so great, because we have these lights turning on for these specific increments, right? But maybe we like that fade effect that we did over here, how the lights are fading out. And we can still do that. It just requires one additional step. We'll show it. I think we'll show it on this one. We're going to turn an on effect on. We'll have it fade out. The only other thing now we need to do is change our blend mode. It's under layer blending. We want to just do it to brightness. So this is going to control the brightness. I lied. It's got to be above. Actually, if we change this one to, right, this is normal. If we change this one to brightness, okay, but now we've only got this on the first one, so we'd have to really copy this effect multiple times. Let me see if this is it going to work. Yep, there it goes. Just take a second to render out. So now you're getting that pulsing. So basically, we're turning the light on. We're having to, if we removed, this is the simplest way to show it. Let me remove this out of the way. Let me just render it quick so it renders through. Right, so it's turning on all these lights every single time, and then we're basically using this sort of like a mask or something, and only. So even though they're cycling all the times, we're controlling the brightness with this, so we can get it to move across. And then, all right, I got one more I want to show you, and then we can add one question that came up a couple questions that came up at the last class I did that I got an answer for somebody on, and then we'll open it up for questions. Actually, I lied. I got two more things. I skipped one thing that I meant to show. I wanted to show the single strand. We can use a single strand on the brightness. Let's shorten up just a little bit. All right, so this is another way you could get the lights to move across and to a beat. Right, if we increase our chase size, you can see down here where you're seeing how it actually affects it. We can increase the chase size, so now we get a little bit more. Let's even make the chase size even a little bit bigger. and you put on fades, they'll start to fade in and out. Let's go back to like a smaller one so we get it coming across. We'll get rid of that. You can have two chases, or there we go. So there's two chases. Another way to balance even odds. We showed one way, the other way, right? You could do it with the single strand effect. But so everything you had, you could bounce from left. It's going to come bounce back, bounce forth. You get two chases. And so this is another reason why I like the ability to use all these different xLights effects here, which are not, you can't get that in the dimmer channel there. So the last part I wanted to show, let's just change this back to here. And it's going left to right. Tie it in there so it's already in position. I'm going to just tighten it up so we can see. All right, now we can combine our buffer. So let's just change halves. We'll go left half. We'll drop another one in here. Right half. But this one I'm going to change. I'm going to have it go from right to left. So now we have a way even to, start at the middle, bounce out. And like I said, with these, didn't mean to hit play. Actually, let's just change. We're going to bulk edit our cycles up a little bit. Let's see what the 3 looks like. But even while we're doing this, we still have access to all those other tools we were playing with earlier. Right? We could go in here and do a fan. Gotta hit my all. We could go in here and do a fan tilt. And let's just say we're going to do a so you can see we can create some pretty crazy stuff very easily. Now I've shown everything doing all, which I probably should demonstrate that as the last thing, and then we'll. I think we found him. Oh, that's why. All right. Actually, I'm glad I did this. So I just accidentally dropped it on the wrong channel. So now I move it up here. And let's go to all position. Put on a dimmer. Okay. Okay, the heads are not working. What's going on? So what happens is this effect needs to be per model default. When you drop it on here, on the group, it does that automatically. But if you misplace it like I did there and move it, you lose it. So obviously all selects all the heads, but we can select just the evens. And you could take my even heads and say, I want you to point in, that direction. And then we take the odds and that. And so now you could, everything we're doing with all, you could apply to evens, odds, or individual heads. And you can do it all in this one group. So it opens up a way to, opens up a lot for us. So I think that's pretty good. What I will do is I will package this and I will drop it in chat when we're done. So if anybody wants it, you'll have these all these examples that got worked through for your use. So I did I did a lot of this presentation at the VCS, but we covered a few different things. But one question that came up from somebody was, let's go back to the layout, is, if I want to limit my rotation so it doesn't shine in the neighbor's yard, or limit my tilt angle so so the sequencer doesn't go, is there a way to do that? And there is. I did figure this out. And where it is, we can show a good example of that. Look here, this right head's got a much steeper tilt angle. So let me go back to the sequencer so we can demonstrate that. And let's just drop this in. Turn on the dimmers. I'm going to say, I should add this. These highlights up here will give you a clue to what was been done, because this last one was done with evens and odds. If you poke in here in status, you can see it tells you everything, all the different settings. So you can see it's 135, 246. So it's evens and odds. A lot of times if you click on a lot of these other ones, it's going to come up on all. So that's one way of knowing, what different groupings were used. But I want to reset this to defaults. And okay, so remember this, move this up a little bit. This head's got a different tilt angle. So as we come down, everybody's tilting the same, right? And we hit roughly, probably getting pretty close to our max of most of our heads. So they stop, but this other one's got a little more range, right? He can go down here. So let's just say we bought some heads and then we added one head, and that one had a little bit more range. How could we fix that? And what we want to do is go into our layout, and we'll do it on this head, into tilt. All right, so here we defined its max and min and max limits of rotation. So this is our range of motion, but basically it's saying it will allow xLights to rotate this thing up to 180 degrees both directions if the head will allow it. In this case, our head already stops us because of our range of motion and our Orient to 0 settings. But we could set this, say, instead of minus 180, if we went let's just put minus 90 and see what happens. Let's save that. Come back here. So now, as we come down, we'll see if I change the right one. Yep. So this comes down. Now that stops at 90 degrees. So if you had a particular head that you didn't want, you can mess with either going the other direction, it's going to still exceed it because we didn't set it. Same thing. So technically to match ours, we were what, 110, 105. So I think we'd go minus 105 to 105. And that should, now this head, now tilt should match. So now if we come back this way, yep, see it stops where all those other ones do. So now we've tied it in. But that same and it stops this way. And likewise, layout. Let's just say here on the pan channel, right? We're saying we'll let you go 180 degrees each direction, but let's just set this one at minus 90 and 90. Say we didn't want our heads to go beyond 90 degrees. And we're just changing that on moving head 1. So now when we pan back and forth, you'll see it all. As I go, head 1 is going to stop at 90 while the rest keep going. So that's how you would set, if you needed to set limits on your heads to keep them within certain ranges, you would set them there. All right, let me see if I can see. John, we got any questions in chat? Or if anybody's got any questions, feel free to speak up.
That was me that asked you that question. I wonder if that would work also with a DMX as well.
I have not tried that. So I don't know.
It gives me something to test and play with, doesn't it? So when you import someone else's effects at this time and you set your head that way, then it doesn't matter what their effects do, the head will stop at that point and not move any further.
Correct, because it's gonna respect the limits that you set on your layout.
Oh, cool.
All right, so I do want to show one thing. Actually, if there's no other questions, I want to show one thing on a quick importing. So let me just. I'm going to go to new sequence. No. Actually, let me go to tools. I told you all I'd almost totally screwed up there. Let me save this. Let me package this quick. Yeah, finger that. All right, so let me do a new sequence, and we'll skip the audio, and it's not really important. So this sequence I am importing was actually done on 8 heads, and that were all pointing the same direction. So like I said, I'm just going to copy over the moving heads group to the moving heads group. Copy the dimmers over to the dimmers. And that's just an extraneous shot. Other one, we don't actually need that dimmer strand 1. Okay, sure. So I'm going to render this really quick. Shouldn't take. Display elements. So I'm just going to run through a few of these effects, and then I want to talk about. So like I said, this was sequenced on. Let's skip to a more interesting one. So this was sequenced on 8 heads, but the effect still will work, on this layout with 6. I got to change the sequence length. I just skipped the music. And right now there's one little. I got to re-render it. So pardon. So see here we're using some of the things. So if you look right here, I'm going to pause it. Actually, I'm going to just stretch this out for the sake of what we're doing. I'm going to turn the shimmer off. All right, so this was done on 6 heads, or on 8 heads, but now it's imported on 6. So one thing right now that that doesn't automatically convert is if there's using a fan tilt or a fan pan. Okay. In this case, I have this fan tilt at 15 degrees. If I come to status and I look in here, it's still computing these angles, uh, as if there was 8 heads. So even though I only have 6. So the simple fix for that is all you have to do, you just have to touch the effect in some way to force it to regenerate. So I'm just going to do it something simple, right? I'm going to change groupings. I'm going to take groupings, make sure I hit my all. I have to take my groupings and go up to 2 or 3 and back to 1. And now it recalculated and it fixed it. But that is the one thing that isn't. I know there's another. That doesn't show it very good, but there's some other examples in here where. Yeah, I guess this might be one. Let me come into this effect. So it's the same thing, right? Because I'm using, there's a fan pan in here. So they're not all, you can see this one's angled in farther more, but same thing. Select all, just move your groupings up to 2 and back to 1, and it recalculates it and it fixes it. So it's a little bit of a challenge, but not not overbearing. That's the one thing I found when you're importing and the heads don't match up. If you're using a fan pan or a fan tilt, you've got to force it to recalculate to your number of heads. But there is some code that hopefully, and I'll demonstrate it, that one of our people have generated to help solve that. And let's see if it works. So we'll do change temporarily. All right, so we'll go import effects. Come back to that sequence. So if we zoom in a little bit, we find that I was just trying to save us from. So this was the effect before that we had to touch. You can see now it is. I'll stretch it out and turn off the shimmer, and it's working. And if you come up here, you can see if we come into status, it's fixed it for us. So hopefully we'll get that in, and that will alleviate one of the other issues with the heads. So, all right, any questions?
You got a couple in chat, Mark.
All right, let's see here.
First one was assumption is that I need to switch to string effect for my moving head to make the best use of the advanced moving head features. And I'm assuming he's saying that use the string setup in your layout.
I guess in my opinion, I would say that would be my opinion. I can't say that absolutely, but I wouldn't even say you need to switch. If you're still doing it, the groups, you can add the string effect and still do it your other way. So you could definitely add the string, as a separate. It's just basically a shadow. It's just shadowing your channels. So it wouldn't prevent you from doing anything you were doing, your old way. And another question people ask, well, if I had the old sequences that were done doing DMX, will they work with this new effect? And no, there's no way to convert the old sequences over. Your old sequences will all work with your layout. So this is just an additional functionality.
And your next question, Joe asked, will
Yeah,
limits set in your layout hold those limits if the effect is
yeah,
on DMX, on the individual mover? Oh, never mind. It was
yeah.
asked.
That one we asked, and I don't know. We'll have to
I
play with
get
that. And then Pierre
Okay.
says, yeah, Pierre, that's true. There's no perfect answer. Moving heads are they're challenging because there's so many different vendor specs and everything is different. So I know
Yeah,
what
this was when you were explaining when you touching the effect to fix the fan pans and those ones. If there's different values on the pans for two of the heads and two other heads have different values, if you select all, it's gonna if you touch that one value, all four will set to that pan.
yeah.
That
So
and just one other quick note I just wanted to say. So if you currently there's a current bug as well where if you map, let's say you have an effect on moving head six from a vendor and you only map that moving head six to your moving head four, when you render, it's not going to actually move or play. You have to just touch the effect. You just have to click on the effect to make it fix itself. I don't know if you saw that yet, but there is a bug on that at the moment.
all right, no, I hadn't seen that one. So
No.
it's a relatively new effect. So obviously, the more people that start using it, the more we can get it. We can find the little things that need to be fixed. But I think it makes things in a way a lot easier. Certainly gain some advantages. There's a few disadvantages, but in my opinion, the advantages far outweigh the disadvantages, and I think it's, for myself, I'm going to be any of my sequences. I'm going to start doing everything using this because I just think to me it's the right way to go. But that's my opinion. So
It's a lot easier than the DMX effect.
yeah, and I spent a lot of time trying to figure out ways of sequencing on just keeping everything on the group level and still get that point where it looks like it's individual head sequencing, so things will import easily. And and a point is to also if you sequence with that in mind, that it's going to be used by other people. There's a couple different ways. If you do something custom just for yourselves and go crazy, if it can be up to a sequencer to make something easier or more difficult to import too, depending on if you give up a little bit of movement and constrain yourselves a little bit, you can make something that can import pretty relatively easily to everybody's layout. But it's choice. Yeah, it's up choices for everybody to make. There's like this hobby. There's multiple ways to do the same thing, and none of them are right and none of them are wrong. It's just a matter of what works for you. So let me. When I stop share, I will drop that in the chat, the little zip file, and so everybody has it. And if I'll be on for a little while, but we'll call that a
Anybody
wrap,
else
I
have
guess.
any questions?
Well, one thing I noticed, I was messing around with my layout while you were playing with that as well, Mark. And one thing I noticed that's completely different from how I've done things completely in the past on the individual mover level is the render order. So I've helped a lot of people fix their render order. And it's always been the group of moving heads, each individual mover, and then the string groups. And I noticed that if I do it the way you were doing it in there, actually them string groups have to be above each individual mover if you're using that moving head effect on the moving head group level, or else they won't light up. I don't know if you've noticed that or not, but that's something I was playing around with and realized.
Yeah, and that's why that's true. That's why, I have the group here. The individuals are here, but
They have the string groups
and my string
right below.
my string groups are here. But you can. I found when I wanted to play with it the other way, I would come in. I don't know what happens if you start to drop stuff in here. I haven't played with that part yet. So, but yeah, that's true. So, let me.
Anybody else have any questions? Well, Mark, I want to say thank you. And
You're welcome.
we learn new ways to do the stuff in xLights. It gets interesting. Thank you for taking it on and teaching us.
All right, and well, thanks for pushing it back for a half an hour, so I could. I had my all important fantasy football draft. I had to make sure I didn't get auto drafted some bad players. So I appreciate.
Mark, thank you.